So, folks, I had an absolute stinker in round 4. I do apologise. I was correct with the Rabbitohs, Broncos, and the Seagulls. But I'm ready for an 8 out of 8. I'm ready to provide you with an 8 out of 8. So let's get on with the first game of this week. Kicking things off, we have the Raiders taking on the Sharks. Now, the Raiders are quite an annoying team already this season because I had so much faith, I had so much confidence in them with the way they start this season. It was kind of similar to last year as well. I think the first 2, maybe 3 games, they looked like a really competent team. They knew how to break teams open down the short side. A decent kicking game, decent run game, strong through the middle, and that's how they started the season as well. And all of a sudden, defensively, they're having major lapses. In possession, there's a lot less sting than they had initially, and sometimes teams can take dips, but this is just the way that they look seems so uncharacteristic from how they started the season. It's not like they took a slight step backwards. This looks like a different team from round 1 and 2 to 3 and 4. So I don't really know where to place the Raiders at the moment. Now, with the Sharks, they let me down a bit against the Bulldogs. I understood that the Bulldogs could win that game. They're a really strong defensive team. But to be so inept in possession is just quite disappointing, especially with the lineup that they've got. Now, one of the changes to the back line is Ito is not in, Hiroti is now into this current lineup. If I'm leaning towards a team that I trust right now, based on the individuals in the team, the evidence so far from both sides and the opponents that they've played against so far, I'm kind of leaning towards the Sharks in this one. Because the Raiders, yes, they took on the Seagulls, who are a strong attacking team, but they were just nowhere near good enough in that game. And then to just be so sluggish against the Cowboys, come on. You just can't be doing that. Like, some of the effort areas just weren't good enough. Then for the Sharks, I think at least the fact that Fonua-Blake can drive it home through the middle. Braden Trindle's kicking game is effective enough. Nico Hines over on that right edge connecting with Britton Nakora, I think will find line breaks. And I just think it is going to be a really close game, but I just think there's enough pieces in that Sharks team, and they've shown enough quality, at least compared to the level of opponents they've played so far, that I trust them just slightly. So I'm going to go with the Sharks to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Panthers taking on the Cowboys. The Cowboys managed to get a vital win against the Raiders at the weekend. So fair play to them. And Jake Clifford, I think, is starting to acclimatise to that team. He's fitting in nicely. That's something that Drinkwater and Dearden greatly need. They need somebody else that can relieve pressure off them, because the back line for me is still a little bit underwhelming with Darby, Purdue, Vilea and Talangi. Of course, we know Talangi is a quality player, but the rest of them, it seems a little bit underwhelming for me. Bateman's still getting starts, and my God, there are plenty of Cowboys fans complaining about him. O'Donnell, in Super League last year with Lee Leopards, plenty of Lee fans love him, and is doing fine. But there's so much sting taken out of their attack with Nanai on the bench. Just start him. For God's sake, just start Jeremiah Nanai. You're not doing yourself any favours by keeping someone of his quality on the bench and limiting his minutes in the game. It makes no sense to me why you'd do that. Now, for the Panthers, they have not looked like a good team. They've been very sluggish in possession. Defensively, they're very vulnerable as well. Through the middle, it doesn't look like they've got the power that they used to have, of course, with James Fisher-Harris in there. It looks like they've adopted sort of an offload culture in the team as well. It's less about the punching holes through the middle, and it's just a lot of it is now trying to focus on getting offloads, getting the second phases. Of course, they were without Nathan Cleary last week, and he comes in, so you cannot forget the Cleary factor. One of the biggest negatives as well for the Panthers this week is there's no Brian Toto. So in terms of carries out the backfield, that's going to be very limited. Dane Laurie has a lot of mistakes in his game. He's likely to possibly drop the ball once or twice from the high ball this week. I think the Panthers will struggle again, but I don't think the Cowboys have it in them right now to take on this kind of level. Yes, it was a decent effort against the Raiders, but I think Alamotti and Tango as a partnership down the right edge defensively, I think will be strong enough to keep them out on that side. Jenkins has had a few more minutes now under his belt to keep developing. Casey McLean, I think, is reliable enough, but is obviously not a complete player yet. Cole will feel a lot more comfortable and confident with Cleary in there. And I think there is a strong enough forward pack from the Panthers to compete through the middle. And yeah, it's the Nathan Cleary factor for me that I can't really look past. And that's just going to be the slight difference maker in this one. So I'm going to go with the Panthers to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Rabbitohs taking on the Roosters. I understood that the Roosters might lose to the Titans last week. I did mention that in my predictions video. But they had so much possession in quality field position inside the red zone and were so dull when spreading the ball. So unbelievably predictable. The same stuff again and again and again. Whereas with the Rabbitohs, not only have they looked like quite an exciting attacking team, they're not perfect by any means, but they are definitely exciting because of the Jai Gray factor at fullback. What I really respect from Wayne Bennett this week is keeping Jai Gray in there for Latrell Mitchell to enter the back line. That is exactly what I would have done. If you had to drop somebody, and I know this seems quite harsh, you would have dropped probably Jamie Humphreys to put Whiten at 6, Walker at 7. If Campbell Graham was still there, Graham goes into that back line if you make that kind of change. Or Jamie Humphreys goes to hooker in place of Mamazelis. But for the players that are there, the back line of Tass, Mitchell, Whiten and Ravalawa, really experienced, top-class back line there, defensively strong enough and in possession, quality, especially with Latrell Mitchell. But Jai Gray gets a real confidence boost of keeping that spot at number 1. He's leading the Dally M leaderboard at the moment. And there's still question marks over Robert Toyer, Mark Nwanganitawaze, of their attacking and defensive capabilities. Mitchell and Whiten, they know exactly what they're doing. I think they'll win those battles. So for me, the fact that Sandon Smith is still finding his way. Chad Townsend has a dodgy kick in his game here and there. Jamie Humphreys looks really confident, really settled, really clear about his intent. And Cody Walker leads the charge down that left edge. I think there's more than enough quality pieces and more than enough evidence that the Rabbitohs have shown so far that they could not only win this one, but comfortably win this one. And you'd imagine that the Roosters will be right up for this one to try and keep it potentially closer. There's always the rivalry factor, potentially makes it a close game. But the Rabbitohs look so much more competent, and I just don't have that trust in the Roosters. But I think it's time to place a bit of faith in the Rabbitohs, so don't let me down. I'm going to go with the Rabbitohs to win 13+. Next up, we have the Eels taking on the Dragons. So I want to start with the Dragons' win over the Melbourne Storm. What I really respected about their performance was that they just kept staying in the grind. They had to deal with a lot of heavy pressure from the Storm inside the red zone, but dealt with it quite well. I will say, in defence of Melbourne Storm, which I'll also reiterate when I get onto them, the weather wasn't great and possibly prevented Melbourne Storm from executing as cleanly as they'd like. So when Melbourne was just trying to crash over inside the red zone, they were less effective, but the Dragons did a great job of stopping those attempts to crash over. So as much as Storm was poor in possession, defensively the Dragons were great, and they held out for so long, and the moment they started to get good field position in Storm's half of the field, they came up with points. The Dragons' resilience was, honestly, a lot of respect to them for how resilient they were in that game. And I think it is a testament to the attitude, the difference in attitude that they had, especially from last year. Now, the Eels, they have really been through it so far this season. I don't think there are enough pieces in there to overthrow the Dragons this week. Iongi, I think, is still a little bit raw. He's got a bit to learn. Dylan Brown, still without Mitchell Moses as a partner in the halves. There's only so much that Dylan Brown can do. He's not the guy to really lead a team in the halves, in my opinion. I think Russell, Penasini, Lomax and Adokar, they can create plenty of opportunities, especially Lomax and Adokar over on the left edge. I think they will find points here and there. But Dean Hawkins leading the way at number 7 is... I don't think he's going to give the Eels enough control over the game. I think with the size of the Dragons as well, with Couchman, Clemmer, Leilua and Sewer in there as well, and Jack DeBellin starting, I think they could really overpower the Eels through the middle. I think the Dragons have shown enough quality spreading the ball. They've shown more than enough resilience defensively as well. And the Clint Gutherson factor in this one as well, because he will... I think he'd love to set a statement this week and show the Eels what they're missing out on. And I think with all the pieces that the Dragons have got, the evidence that has been shown so far this season as well leans heavily towards the Dragons. I just think because the Dragons aren't a perfect team yet, and the Eels they'll continue to improve and they'll have to keep fighting for these wins. I don't think it'll be an absolute massacre, but I do trust the Dragons to get this one done. So I'm going to go with the Dragons to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Titans taking on the Dolphins. The Dolphins have looked really disappointing. And if you look at their team on paper, to me it looks like a team that should be quite comfortably fighting for top 8. Not that they should comfortably make it, but they should be fighting for top 8. In possession, with all those quality pieces in there, the fact that they look so one-dimensional is so disappointing. And I'm not smart enough to figure out why they look as dull as they do in possession. I just don't get it. You have speedsters in Tabai Fidel, Farnworth and Avarillo just inside, that you can use in so many different ways. And you've got quality players in Nikarima and Katoa that can run games and can control tempos of games. They're just not putting it together. The forward pack, I don't know if there's enough in there to kind of dominate against anybody. If you get quick play the balls for Marshall King, you'll do a lot of damage. And there are good pieces in there with Saifiti, Kafusi, Finifayuaki, Lemuelu and Plath. But they don't have a strong enough forward pack to overpower anybody through the middle. And they're looking really one-dimensional in possession. Now, you compare that to a Titans team that, even without Kenny and Pereira, they're still putting up somewhat decent points. They look like a solid enough attacking team. Defensively, they've not been perfect, but you look at what they did against the Roosters, the amount of pressure that they had to deal with, and yes, of course, I said that the Roosters weren't great in possession inside the red zone, but the Titans dealt with so much pressure defensively and did a great job not to, jump the gun too early, to be flustered, to be baited into anything. They just look quite calm. I don't know if the Dolphins can trouble this Titans team that much. Now, I think the Dolphins will probably be strong enough defensively to kind of stay within the game over 80 minutes. But Titans defensively, compared to what the Dolphins have offered up so far, I think should be somewhat comfortable. And it's going to be the defense of the Titans that gets them the win in this one. Part of me wants to say 13 plus. I'm kind of on the fence about 1-12 and 13 plus. Okay, I think the Titans' defense will be strong enough over the course of 80 minutes. And I think with the lack of control that the Dolphins have had over games, with the fact that the Titans have a strong enough forward pack to really compete through the middle and do a lot of damage, especially with Fotueka, Campbell Gillard and Tino Farsu Malawi, especially with Fafita and Jolliffe coming on from the bench, I think the Titans can set another statement win this week. So I'm going to go with the Titans to win 13 plus. Next up, we have the Broncos taking on the Tigers. Of course, the biggest news for the lineups this week is that there's no Jerome Luai and Latu Fainu jumps in to the number 7 role. I think in terms of what the orders will be from Benji Marshall, I think he'll say to Fainu, you just play what you see, play what you're comfortable doing. You don't have to replicate Jerome Luai, because he's not Jerome Luai. I think Marshall understands this and the Tigers fans understand this. He's not going to be an exact carbon copy. But I think the pressure is now going to be placed onto Lachlan Galvin. There will be a lot of pressure put on him. Marshall will expect him to control the kicking game, to be the trigger man to say, this is what we're doing, to be communicative throughout the entire team, to lead everybody, and just be the voice in full control. Is he ready for that? I don't know. Part of me says no. I don't think he's fully ready for it yet. I think we'll see sparks from him. I would like to see what it's like with the weight of the world on his shoulders to see how well he carries that. But I don't think he's ready to lead yet. I think Luai still needs to be in there for the Tigers to have a chance. I like the individual pieces that they've got in there. Bula can create opportunities. This Broncos defensive line can get out of shape at times, and Bula can certainly, affect that line as well. Taruva and Dewey, I think they'll be strong over on the right edge, but there's now a disconnect with Toa and Laulili, who will have a slight defensive disconnect. And that's an area that I believe it would be Cobbo and Staggs can really attack. So you compare that back line of the Tigers to the Broncos, Cobbo, Staggs, Shibasaki and Arthurs. Again, the Broncos aren't a perfect team, but they've looked so much more competent defensively and in possession. Hunt and Reynolds, they're still continuing to develop a partnership, lead each side of the field as they see fit. Really effective when spreading the ball as well. Reece Walsh is not having a perfect season, but is still such a handful to bring down. The Tigers will try and target him, put him under pressure, and make sure that he's got limited time on the ball. But there's so many other pieces. You can give the ball to Shibasaki, but you can then give the ball to Staggs over on the other side of the field to punch holes over on the right-hand side. And then the way that sort of Haas and Carrigan are leading the way in the front row, they're getting quick play the balls for Corey Pakes. They're getting plenty of offloads, creating second phases. Kobe Hetherington's had some decent carries through the middle as well. I think in terms of how well drilled the Broncos are compared to the Tigers, I feel so much more confident about the Broncos winning this one. And all of the individuals in that Broncos team over the course of 80 minutes, I think will just be too strong for the Tigers. And with Laulili in there, who's going to be a potential target, without Jerome Luai, it's going to be really, really difficult. I don't know if the Tigers are ready for that kind of adjustment yet, because they seem like a team right now that needs all their best players. So I'm going to go with the Broncos to win 13+. Next up, we have the Seagulls taking on the Storm. I will start with Melbourne Storm first, because what I said last week was, even though Tyron Wishart is in the number 7 role, I fully trust him to keep things as it normally is for Melbourne Storm. Unfortunately, Wishart did not have a great game. Now, the Melbourne Storm as a whole were very, very poor in possession. So much quality field possession. They had so many penalties given to them. A lot of great field position and just did nothing with it. So one-dimensional, so dull, just looked incapable of making any genuine decisions over what they actually wanted to do. And of course, as I referenced earlier, when I talked about the Dragons and their game with the Melbourne Storm, is the weather affected, the weather does affect teams' execution. And maybe teams get a little bit more timid trying to spread the ball because they don't want to make mistakes. But at some point, you just gotta go for it. You've just got to give it a go and say, right, well, if we make a mistake here, we just have to back it up defensively. If we give the ball away, there's a forward pass, a knock-on, whatever, we've just got to back it up defensively. And there was just so few risks taken from the Melbourne Storm. Now, I think if the weather's going to be fine this time around, with the changes that the Seagulls have to make, so Hopewate has to go to fullback. The back line is now Saab, Kula, Garrick, and Falalo, who is going to be a target. Brooks and Cherry Evans, of course, will lead the way in the halves. I think without Taniela Paseka in the forwards for the Seagulls, he would be massive in that battle. I think the size of the forwards for the Seagulls are strong enough to compete and possibly compete with and possibly beat the Melbourne Storm. But I just think the way that the Melbourne Storm are defensively drilled, the way that Bellamy will want to get a reaction after last week's performance. Jerome Hughes is also listed in the reserves. There's a chance he gets promoted to the first team. There's a chance. But assuming that Tyron Wishart starts, he will hopefully have a much better performance individually. And I think the Storm defence should be strong enough to keep out the Seagulls in long enough portions of the game. And I think with the weather potentially being better and hopefully being better for the Melbourne Storm's sake, they will spread the ball a lot quicker, a lot more effectively. They will go at Ruben Garrick and Failalo as a disconnected left side edge, and they will find opportunities there. And I think they're just a smarter team overall. It will bring Ryan Pappenhausen into the game more, it'll bring Munster into the game more, and Harry Grant into the game more. And I think the response that we're likely to get from a Craig Bellamy side, it's very rare that you see back-to-back losses from the Melbourne Storm. So I'm going to go with the Storm to win 1 to 12 points. Finally for this round, we have the Bulldogs taking on the Knights. The Knights have looked okay. Not a perfect team in possession, not a perfect team defensively. I'm not sure at what point I'm going to find some consistency with the Knights. And that's been a little bit of a problem with them because they can put in these strong defensive performances. They were 6th best defensively last year in the NRL. In possession, they do look like a more effective team. I think they look like they've got more of a clue with Cogger at 7, Sharp at 6, Kalen Ponga, of course, comfortable as ever, and creative as ever at number 1. The Knights are still kind of finding their way. And I think one of the issues that they've maybe got is that there might still be a little bit too much focus on next year. How do they want to play to make way for Dylan Brown? I think there's possibly too much focus on let's figure out a system now that suits Brown before he's even there. I don't think that's all of it. I think there's just maybe an element of it. Defensively, I trust them to be strong enough over 80 minutes against most teams. Now, I would have said, if this was the first time I was seeing Hayward and Sexton together in the halves, I would have said it's strong enough defensively to keep out the Bulldogs in long enough portions of the game. But the fact that Hayward and Sexton, even without, with Burton missing, has still looked effective enough offensively. And defensively, Hayward doesn't look like a liability in the halves, playing in that 3-man or 4-man in role from the left edge to replace Burton. Honestly, fair play. Because I thought that could be a massive detriment to the Bulldogs, but Hayward has just slotted in quite nicely. Sexton has put in some solid performances. The back line of Wilson, Cherry, Crichton and Montoya is still incredibly strong defensively. So if we compare the attack and defence of both teams, I think there's still the potential of a disconnect between Hayward and Sexton. It's not going to be perfect every single time because they're not going to be completely comfortable and used to each other yet, but it's developing week on week. So against the Knights' defence, they might have some struggles here and there, but they've shown plenty of evidence so far that they can overcome any issues and they can create opportunities. And they don't just need to rely on Hayward and Sexton. They can look at Saluka Fafita through the middle. They can look at Preston towards the edges. They can look at Cherry and Crichton in possession with solo runs, like solo sweeping runs, getting just around the outside of their opposite centres. Sexton can lead the charge with his kicking game and a decent short-range kicking game as well. So I think the Bulldogs have shown they can put up enough points. The Knights are a decent defensive team, but I think the Bulldogs have shown they can overcome that. In attack, the Knights certainly look better than they did last year. They look more competent. They've got a lot of great individual pieces that can create opportunities. Ponga, Gagai, Best. Marju with his carries out the backfield as well. Sharp, I think, will be quite a handful to deal with over on the left-hand side. But defensively, the Bulldogs are so well drilled that this could be quite a comfortable game for them this week. And the fact that they look so comfortable against the Sharks, who really could have done a lot of damage on the attacking side of the game, the Bulldogs are they're just chipping away at teams. It must be so frustrating to play against the Bulldogs, because you think, you've trained all week, you've worked on the patterns of play that you want to go through, you're executing well, you're working hard in training, and then you get onto the field against the Bulldogs and it's like, it's not working, mate. It's not working. It must be an absolute piss take playing against the Bulldogs. But I'm going to go with the Bulldogs to win 13+. So to recap my predictions for this round, I'm going to take the Sharks and Panthers to win by 1-12, the Rabbitohs 13+, the Dragons 1-12, Titans and Broncos 13+, Storm 1-12, and Bulldogs 13+. In terms of win confidence, I'm at about 75%. I think the Raiders could possibly get one over on the Sharks this week. I think there's always the possibility, given that it's a Rabbitohs versus Roosters, that it does go the other way. The Roosters do have quality individuals that can turn a game at any moment. And maybe there's a world in which the Dolphins manage to get their first win against the Titans, because I think there's an element to the Titans where they could kind of mess up at some point. But in terms of margin confidence, I'm at about 85%. I'm quite confident with the margins there. I can't see the Sharks or Raiders winning by a large margin. I can't see the Panthers destroying the Cowboys. But yeah, all of those in there, I'm somewhat confident with. But yeah, that's my recap for this round. So as always, if you guys have your own predictions, please let me know in the comments down below, and also make sure you check out the Rugby League fan question that I've pinned to the comments as well. But that's going to be it. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. It does help to get the video out there to more people. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with more Rugby League content, and check out the Kinetic Rugby League website and store in the description down below. So that's going to be it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.